Welcome to the webinar. We will start in just a couple of minutes to give everyone a chance to join. While we're waiting, just hang in there and we will be starting shortly. So thanks everyone for joining. While people trickle in, I just wanted to welcome everyone to the Aligning Science, People, and Capital, Transforming Great Science into fundable biotech. So welcome to the webinar. We will be joined by an incredible panel today with Jay Bachu from Xontogeny, Alan Hakimi from Technomark, Robert Balfour from ALSA Ventures, Jeff Bernstein from Tegmine Therapeutics, and Jeff Fatzinger from Certara. And this will be moderated by Fran Brown with Certara. So we are Life Science Nation. We are happy to welcome you to the upcoming Resi Boston, September 22nd and 23rd in, as you might guess, Boston. And we are delighted to be preceding it with a tremendous free event that is co-sponsored by Certara, which will educate and teach biotechs on, how best to go about their journey to raise funding, get their strategy right, to be able to entice investors, get the licensing deals done, and so forth. So welcome to our webinar. We'll get started in just 1 minute to give everyone a chance to join. Thanks everyone who registered. You'll hear from some great investors today, as well as a great founder. And you'll be able to hear their advice and their lessons. I think we're having a few people with technical issues, but I'm sure they'll all get resolved. So thanks everyone for joining, and we will get started in just about 30 seconds, just to give everyone a chance to join. So welcome again to the Aligning Science, People, and Capital webinar. Really our August investor webinar from Life Science Nation in collaboration with Certara. We will be hearing from Jay Bachu from Xontogeny, Alan Hakimi from Technomark, Robert Balfour from ALSA Ventures, Jeff Bernstein, a founder at Tegmine Therapeutics, to get the founder perspective, Jeff Fatzinger from Certara, an expert in regulatory strategy and science, and it's moderated by Fran Brown, SVP at Certara. So you're really in for a great treat today. We would like to invite you to Resi Boston, September 22nd through 23rd in Boston, followed by several days of virtual partnering. As you guys probably know, Resi is the biggest meeting in terms of attending investors in life sciences. Yes, there are larger meetings by total number of attendees, but we are the meeting that has the most investors actually attending. And it's followed by our flagship meeting, Resi JPM, which will be absolutely huge this year. One thing to note is Resi Boston is a 2-day meeting this year, and it's actually 3 days for biotech because it's preceded by a great educational event in combination with Certara, where we'll have a all-day catered free session on the Monday before Resi, specific to biotechs who have raised seed or Series A, where we'll really educate you by a panel of experts on how to get your investor strategy right, your licensing strategy right, what you need to think about to do that. And we'll have a great reception afterwards. So I also wanted to note that this year's Resi will be featuring the GFOB, which stands for the Global Family Office Bioforum. There will be over 40 family offices in attendance, and they're actually coming for a family office luncheon. So you will find no meeting with more family offices at it. And please use Web 200 for $200 off Resi Boston or Resi JPM. So you can scan the QR code. It's a great opportunity, and we're really happy to be doing this webinar in concert with Certara. Life Science Nation also offers the most extensive investor database based on actual interviews with investors, with over 4,000 investment firms in the database and over 10,000 contacts. So get detailed profiles, search for the investors that are great fits for you, as well as be able to reach out to them easily. We've talked about our Resi conferences, and of course, LSN Labs provides great educational materials for entrepreneurs all over the world. These are an example of some of the many, many investors that attend our meetings and are available for partnering. They're coming to meet with you. And these are the 10 different types of investors attend. So you should definitely come to Resi if you're fundraising or out licensing. Participate in our investor pitch challenge, where you can pitch directly to a panel of dedicated investors who are aligned to your modality and who are obligated to give you feedback. So it's a room full of a dedicated panel of investor judges, plus a slew of other investors in licensors and interested parties. So please pitch at Resi. We offer a free investability report at golifesciencenation.com/LSN-labscar. And you can quickly use AI to figure out how good your investment deck is. And finally, email me at s.das@lifesciencenation.com to get some great investor recommendations. So we're happy to do a session with you. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Fran Brown, who will be moderating the webinar to talk a little bit about Certara, our great partner, not only for this webinar, but also for the Biotech Forum, the event that's happening the day before Resi, meant for biotechs who have raised seed or Series A. So Fran, take it over.
Well, thank you, Sugata, for the introduction. Good morning to everybody, and thanks for joining us. I'm Fran Brown. I'm the Senior Vice President and Global Head of Drug Development Science at Certara, and I'm going to be moderating today's session. I just want to take a couple of words to tell you what Certara is, because it's an industry well-kept secret. So we are a company of over 1,500 people, and we are really sort of focused on transforming the way companies do drug development. So we are a bit of a schizophrenic company because we are half sort of technology and software, and the other half is really drug development expertise and tech-enabled services. And really our core strategy in all of this is to help companies develop drug development plans that actually leverage a lot of the technology and approaches that are out there today. And to do that in a way that actually helps them do more efficient development, helps them do more streamlined studies, and saves sort of time and cost and gets them better to whatever endpoint that is for them. We have the world's largest group of pharmacometricians, and in fact, the largest group of quantitative systems pharmacology modelers as well. Interesting fact that since 2014, actually over 90% of all novel FDA approvals have been supported by Certara, either through their software or through their services. And over the last few years, since 2019, when we started tracking this, we have actually supported small companies and early phase development. And those companies have been raised over $65 billion over that period. So we're excited to be here today. We're excited to hold this webinar in conjunction with Life Sciences Nations. We've got a great panel here for you today. Just before we get started, I would like to come back and reiterate Sugata's information around the Certara Biotech Forum workshop, which will be held on September 21st in Boston, alongside the day before the Resi conference. And really the aim here is partnering with LSN. We are really focusing on helping companies think about not just on the investment side, but really how do you combine all of the different challenges of having a sound development plan with an sound investment strategy, and pulling the two sides of that coin together. So um, this is a registration event, so we will be there, I will be there, and a lot of the expertise that is accessible through our organization to actually support any one-to-one discussions, as well as a strong agenda of panel sessions and education parts in order to actually give people the tools and the thought process and the thinking of how they put these development plans together.
Thank you, Fran. And I will terminate the presentation, and I'll ask our panelists to turn their camera and audio on mute, and we'll start the webinar.
Thank you. So let's start by a few introductions. And we do have two Jeffs with us today. So in order to avoid sort of confusion, we have a Jeff with a G and a Jeff with a J. So I'm going to start off with Jeff with a G, Jeff Fatzinger. Maybe you can introduce yourself and a little bit about the company that you're working for, and why you think sort of the background you have is going to be very relevant for today's discussions.
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. I'm Jeff Fatzinger. I am also with Certara. Currently, I head up the regulatory development, consulting, and strategic side of the business. I didn't start there. I started early on, a scientist and a lawyer, but I had my own ideas and developed and patented several drugs and devices early on, and learned by accident the minefield is what do you do with that? And over the years, I have founded and then exited several biotech companies with the different assets. But each one I learned something along the way from before I finally exited and realized that there are a lot of companies out there that didn't have some of that support, because I was one of those going through this that didn't have that kind of support. And Certara, as Freda said, offers that kind of support. And in many of my products, they were first in human, from stem cell to implantable devices. And being able to help others navigate what can help them and what to consider. I was a scientist. I was not a businessman. Did not look at this from the same view. And learning along the way, I think my background can help people perspectualize what needs to happen, what to consider, but at the same time, how do you get your products approved? What do you need to tell them you're going to do? So it's a mixed bag, but it provides both sides of the coin.
Thank you. Robert, maybe you could go next.
Sure, happy to. My name is Robert Balfour. I'm an investment director based in London in the UK, and I work for a fund called ALSA Ventures. We are a venture capital fund operating transatlantically with people here in the UK and on the East Coast of the US. We invest only in therapeutics, so no devices or diagnostics. We're open in terms of therapy area and modality, and we like the lead asset of the companies or projects that we invest in to be at a late preclinical or early clinical stage, and then we look to fund them into the clinic, where we have a lot of expertise, particularly in clinical operations. Typical ticket size is $3 to $5 million US, with reserves for future follow-ons. And we invest both in existing companies, and we also found our own companies. We tend to have a bit of an asset focus. We do invest in platform companies, but those platforms need to come along with assets. And looking forward to the conversation today.
Thank you. And Jeff with a J.
Thank you very much for inviting me to be here today. I founded Tegmine Therapeutics about 8 years ago. The company's role is to drug cancer glycans. So these are carbohydrates or sugars which are attached to proteins on the surface of cancer cells, highly expressed in cancer, virtually absent in normal tissues. And so we are an oncology company. Prior to founding Tegmine, I worked at a startup called StemCentrx, which was acquired by AbbVie. And prior to that, worked at Merck Pharmaceuticals. So coming from big pharma and then moving into the startup world. Great to be here.
Thank you. Jay, maybe you could go next.
Awesome, appreciate it. Hey all, I'm the Senior Associate and EIR here at Xontogeny. I'm on the investment and due diligence teams here. I've been with the firm for a little over 5 years at this point in time, and before this, I've helped build cell therapies for autoimmune disease and oncology. I've worked on engineered antibodies, enzymes, particle delivery systems, a good bit of work on the medtech end as well. I built microvalves for incontinence, biopsy needles, infectious disease diagnostics, and more. A quick snapshot of the firm. Xontogeny does a number of things. It's both a seed investor and accelerator, as well as a venture investor as well. On the earlier side of the picture, we do checks in the 500K to 2.5 M area. It's a very founder-friendly environment. We'll help you map out your experiments, hire the right consultants, help manage interactions with the FDA and the works. And as companies mature, that's where the venture investment side of the picture kicks in. We have partnered with Perceptive Advisors, the hedge fund based out of NYC, and we can do investment checks in the 10 to 40 mil area, both directly into our accelerator companies as well as external companies as well. We are open to all modalities, all indications, all company locations, and more. We do both therapeutics and a whole bit on the medtech side as well. So very much a full spectrum player.
Thank you, Jay. And lastly, Alan.
Thank you so much for having me. And I apologize. I just got out of oral surgery, so thus the disfiguration a little bit. But we've pushed through. I'm Alan Hakimi. I'm the managing director of Technomark. Technomark has been around since 1987, originally a British company. We raised our first fund with Lloyds Bank out of London. We invested in 7 Cambridge University, UK, very early stage spinouts, 3 medical device and 4 therapeutics. We exited the fund in 1997, going 6 of 7 via large pharma acquisitions that really put us on the map. 2 of the 3 medical device programs got bought up by Sosei, Japanese life science group, and 3 of the 4 therapeutic programs got bought out by large pharma, including Paradigm Therapeutics got bought out by one of ALSA's board members who used to be with Takeda. Yes, Graham Martin, your buddy. Yeah. And also BioVex from Boston, moved their headquarters to Boston for better financing, got bought out by Amgen for $1.08 billion back in the day. We're the founding investor and the lead investor on all 6 of those acquisitions. As you can imagine, the ROI was so large that we've been able to operate as an evergreen fund since, not having the need to raise new monies. We have a more non-standard approach to investment. We care, dare I say, in this panel, we care more about the drug development and the science as opposed to per se the economics of it. When we evaluate from a scientific standpoint and not as much from a 10x exit standpoint. As long as the science is strong, we get involved as early as IND enabling talks, and we follow the program all the way through. We're long-term investors. We support phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. Our footprint is US and EU. And I want to say I'm grateful for Sugato and his team working with me and my hectic schedule to fit me in. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Alan. So we have an exceedingly experienced panel, so I'm looking forward to this discussion. We're going to start off sort of with a little bit of a basic question, and that is really around what elements make a good company. You know, what sets a company up for success. You know, in a lot of our conversations, it seems to have coalesced around sort of a tripod of the science, the people, and the capital. But it would be great to hear sort of perspectives from the different viewpoints on this panel. So maybe just to kick it off, as sort of the company representation here, Jeff with a J, maybe you could sort of comment on that from your perspectives. What are the the things that set you up for success for a company?
I think the way you describe that, those three things are, for us at least, those are the most important. So just starting with the science for Tegmine and going after these cancer glycans, everything that we've done has been built in-house. And so we didn't license any of the technology in. And cancer glycobiology is notoriously difficult. It's why other companies have traditionally struggled to develop high quality assets against this. So we've spent a lot of time building out our platform, being able to really define what these cancer glycans are through genetic knock-ins and knockouts to make sure we have the best reagents available, and that has enabled us to develop these best antibodies, best in class. When it comes to people, I think that science is always a team effort. And so having not only the best employees around, and we're a small company still, we're 10 employees at the moment, but then also how you think about expanding that influence via either consultants or advisors. So making sure you surround yourself with the best people. It's not always the case that you know the answer. And so being able to find people quickly that know that answer, I think has been very helpful for growing the company. And then the last piece that you mentioned is capital and being able to do science. Science is not cheap, so finding that capital is important. Tegmine's a little bit different from other companies. We're eight years in and we're still entirely angel backed. So we're very, very fortunate to have found some amazing angels that continue to back our vision. And I think that sort of brings the loop back to the science, that as long as we continue to do amazing science and show these angels what we're capable of doing, they believe in the company and the vision, and they have that long-term vision to help cure cancer. And certainly we're working our way towards that, where we're making these what we believe will become transformative medicines.
Great to hear that viewpoint. So it'd be great for some of the investors on the call, to weigh in and from the other side of the coin and think about what it is that resonates with them when they're looking at companies.
If I may,
Sure.
we care mainly about the science and also the personnel, to echo what Jeff said, but in a different way. For us, it's really important that we love first timers. The problem with first timers is, first time CEOs is it's natural for them to think that they've invented the next sliced bread, and telling them that their sliced bread is not the best sliced bread is a very difficult thing to bring them. I've had conversations where verbatim the chief executive comes to me and says, Jeff did a deal for 5 mil. My bread is better than Jeff's. Why can't I do a deal for 5 mil? And it just doesn't work that way. Our industry is maybe to some degree not linear, and there are nuances, and you got to be lucky. I was part of Nobex 20 years ago when they were acquired by we licensed a $283 million deal with GSK for our oral insulin in phase 2. And that deal came about realistically because at the time the G merged with SK, and G came in and was shocked that SK, there was no metabolic or diabetes drug in the pipeline. And it was pure luck that we had been talking with those guys, and they quickly made us a priority. And we did that deal in 6 months, the 283. In 2002, it was a top 10 deal of the year. And I was project management for clinical and preclinical as part of the business development team, and it was a very interesting deal because it really came out of serendipity more than anything else, and the deal ended up falling apart from a talk standpoint, but it was a deal no less. And oh, I'm sorry, Russell, can you flash that question again? There was a question, Alan. There was a question on the bottom. I missed it, and I'm
I
sorry.
think it's a comment. It says, to your point, it is best to get a commercialization expert in at the early stages to have the hard conversations with innovators and do the proper diligence to get the green lights to go to market. I think
Yes, and
concurrence.
I agree with that, but to some degree, I do think that, and maybe I'm the only one on the panel that believes this, that I think on the early stage, really you should just focus on the science. Stop thinking exit, exit, exit.
Yeah.
The exit comes when it comes. Everyone is so like, and I've been very lucky. We did the Theakis deal, which was Imperial College of London spin out. After phase one, it got acquired by Wyeth, subsequently Pfizer, but that's a rarity, for after phase one, and the same thing with it was an metabolic disorder deal for obesity, and we've been a part of very lucky or timely acquisitions, and I will say that it just you can't bank on that. Focus so much more on the science, as I guess Jeff with a G agrees that yes, stop getting when am I going to get my exit? Put your head down, focus on the science, make sure the IND enabling is done properly so you don't get held back. And the most interesting thing happened that one of the companies that we've dealt with did their science, and I wouldn't mention by what name, but in China, did their IND enabling. And shockingly, the FDA came back and said, thank you very much. You'll have to redo all your preclinical in the non-China thing. And I don't know where that came from, but they were very, very shocked. And it put them back. I mean, it could be political, it could be this, it could be that, and stop getting cute with doing it in Guam, for God's sakes. Just stick to some major, just this stuff just blows my mind that everyone's like, yeah, I want to go do my 43% to skip talks and go and do it in Australia. At some point, when you come back to the real world, you'll have to do that talks. To the best of my knowledge, you can't skip talks because you did 15 patients in Australia.
So maybe, I mean, one actually you've given us the perfect rollover into sort of our second topic, which is actually about thinking with the end in mind, which may be an exit strategy, or it may be also making sure that you're actually on path to not delay a development program, because that decreases the value of your asset. So maybe Jeff with a G, I know this one is dear to your heart, sort of the combination of how do you meet multiple masters with one program. So maybe you can kick us off on that. If we have time at some point, I'd like to come back to the question of work done abroad, because that actually is not only increasing, but it's also increasingly accepted. But it's not a given, and you actually have to make sure that you do it in a way that it actually can be accepted across multiple geographies. But Jeff, maybe kick us off on thinking about, what is the end, and how do you sort of plan for a sort of investment exit versus a development milestone?
It's a it has evolved over time, and that's probably one of the key pivotal issues that has to come up if you're an innovator. And as Alan rightfully said, in the early days, you couldn't tell me that I wasn't better than somebody. It didn't matter. In my head, I did have the best sliced bread that was coming down the pike,
Yeah.
and I wasn't going to be told anything differently. And that is the inherent problem. And one of the things that you need to know at that point is, when do you step away from being the key decision maker on understanding what that exit looks like? Because not everybody that is a scientist is also a master finance. But understanding, what are you going to want out of this when you're looking at your exit? In the early days, it was money. It was the investors wanted their 10x. They would turn and burn, strip it down. What could they flog off? Which didn't align with what innovators wanted, because it was typically patient versus profit. That has steadily changed. And as Alan rightfully pointed out, when he started, they look at the science, not necessarily the 10x is what are you doing, but where are you going to do it? And understand your own investors that are coming in. Where is that going to be done? Is this a US deal? Is it a Europe deal? Is it a MENA? Are you looking at the Asian? Are there follow-ons? What are they really going to want to look at? And it's always typically, what do you have? Is it patentable? Is there a follow-on? Is the follow-on included? And who's going to get that? Or do you want that? Do you want your Gen 2 and Gen 3 to remain with you? And what does that type of exit look like? But you need to be able to understand that a product has to get on a market, and that's the ultimate goal. It has to be in patients, and understanding how you're going to get there. And that one size fit all doesn't. The US, even though it is now in a state of flux and change, used to be relatively stable, check the box, sometimes difficultly argumentative to get something through. Whereas the rest of the world had a little bit more of a logical perspective. You didn't always understand the logic, but you could understand what you were going to have to try to do. And understanding your strategy to get the product on the market in these different regions is something that the investors always would come back to, is how are you going to offer this? What is this going to look like? What are you competing against? How is it going to be reimbursed? Just because it works really well doesn't mean that it's going to get the same price point as the incumbent. What data are you going to get? Which a lot of people forget. Clinical data and the data needed for commercialization reimbursement are different. And you can have a great product, but you may not have proven what the value is against incumbent products or what you're coming into. And if you don't have an idea or somebody supporting you along that, you can't expect it to just develop along the way and you have a right answer. You need to have an idea of where you're going to go with your product in the regions you're wanting to target. Where do you want the investment? You need to be flexible, but you need to be realistic. And it is getting better with some of the investors now, some of the more, the angel investors, high net worth people that have been directly impacted by disease. Back in the day, it wasn't. It was mostly a purely financial decision. But you need to build with the end in mind. And not a lot of people do. They build short term. And then when they reach a milestone, they're like, well, what do we do next? You need to understand that it has to go somewhere, and work with the right investors at the right time to found your science to make sure that it can go to the next stage. And if you don't, it takes you longer, or you have less of an investment from one group and you have to continue to find investors from another. And then you're starting to get into a dilution situation, or how much of it retains with you. And it becomes really stressful, and you lose focus on the science. And then you start spending it on the finance. And that's not what people are looking at you for. They're looking at you for the science.
Thanks, Jeff. So continue sort of the trend. A lot of this is how do you balance and deal with sort of multiple different priorities that pull you in different directions. So Jay, Robert, I mean, we've heard from Alan and Jeff their perspective, but what else do you see, and what advice would you give to companies in thinking about how do they meet those multiple drivers and still stay sane doing it?
It's always a balancing act. having the position of an entrepreneur, there's no easy day, um, for anyone to put it very mildly. But just adding on to what some of the folks had mentioned before, I think being very coachable would serve you well. That's one of the things that we specifically aim to screen for, especially for the earlier stage investments that we make, because the most expensive cash any company ever brings in is the earliest cash. It really doesn't matter what company it is. The earliest cash will always be the most expensive equity that you always put out. And so we think it's wiser if the team is coachable and they can take advantage of the experience that we have to offer so that they don't have to go and make those expensive mistakes and take the harsh learnings that they otherwise would have to on their own and perhaps um, make more headway along the way. And of course, at the end of the day, everyone wants to see the best science possible, but that's really what starts the race. It doesn't necessarily mean that you finish it. At the end of the day, so many things have to go correct, the manufacturing, the BD end, how the trial is designed, all these other parameters need to all come together. And taking advantage of your scientific advisory board as well as your own board itself, the board should help aid you in making these decisions, can help you manage all of these priorities that are pulling you in all sorts of different directions.
I agree with Jay. I think science is key, but it all comes down to the people. Because, not to gloat or anything like that, but we, over the past 38 years, of which I've been with Technomark for 21 of them, we have a 68% success rate in clinical trials and clinical programs that we have invested in. And I'm not getting cute with the numbers. 68% of our clinical investment hit endpoint, move on to the next phase, have been successful. And the reason for that is when there's a problem, not if. There's always a problem.
Yeah.
And it's, to echo what you said, it's always manufacturing's fault. Believe me, how many deals have fallen apart because formulation or manufacturing took the scenic route, didn't change, didn't stick to the timelines, whatever it may be. But yes, when there's a problem, me and that CEO need to work together to get the program back on track and not throw mud at each other and sling words at each other, because that's the biggest thing, is keeping calm, moving forward together. We do have a 3-step gateway to yes. One, we don't invest in programs that we don't feel we can intellectually contribute to. 2, we don't invest in programs that we don't have prior demonstrated experience in. We're not a teaching hospital for your drug development program. And lastly, with all due respect, we don't invest in headache CEOs. Because if I'm attached to you for 2, 3, 5 years, you and I, we really need to work together in a non-adversarial way to get the program moving forward through its difficult moments. And I think that the temperament and the, I'm developing the next whatever, Eiffel Tower or whatever you think you are developing, that needs to go away.
So, Robert, I know that's a lot to try and top, but would you like to add the last word on the topic before we sort of head into another area?
Yeah, and sorry, I got disconnected for about 30 seconds and kicked me out. So maybe I've missed some of the conversation, but I guess I wanted to add a little bit about how we think about things. So we typically come in at a late preclinical stage, early clinical stage. So I think we tend to be, when we're looking at things, quite indication focused. So I agree with everything that's been said around, you need great science and you need a great team. I would say that we think quite a lot about that indication and what the unmet medical need is in that indication, And also, do we think that this approach is the best way to solve that particular problem? How does it compare to all the other ways that you might solve that problem? And do we really believe that this is the best one? And I guess picking up a bit about Alan said, we do think a bit about market size. I mean, I think you kind of have to be sort of science led, but I think there has to be a credible plan to a large market. And one of the shifts I've noticed, and I've been interested in feedback from others on the panel on this, at least in the last 3 or 4 years, is that within major pharma and also within the larger investors, there has been a big shift towards large indications. So, talking to some of the major pharma now, if the peak sales potential is below 2, 3, 4 billion, 5 billion in some cases, the BD groups aren't interested in a conversation, and I think that's a significant shift that we've seen over the last few years. I'm talking about the bigger pharma companies. There is a sizable mid-sized group who are kind of going after assets in that lower peak sales potential, but that I think is it's an interesting trend that we've observed and are thinking quite hard about how we play in that space. And I've got a whole list of things I can go through, but just to maybe add one more, one thing we spend quite a lot of time on is what's the reason to believe it's success? And go back to Alan, that's your clinical success rate is great. We're hoping to get something like that. So we do think quite a lot about, what do we think the probability of success is? What's the validation around the target, the data package? What's our reason to believe this will be successful? Got a whole load of other stuff that I could talk about, but just a few things on them.
That I'd like just coming back to one thing that you said, which I actually think is super important, and that is the distinction between good science and solving a medical need. And I think we see work with so many people who have not made the connection between how their science actually solves an acute or even a chronic medical need and how they're going to bridge from one to the other. They're happy to have a new mechanism of action and think that alone is enough for success. But I think when we've talked a lot about putting the science first, and the science is hugely important, but it is only hugely important in a way that it actually addresses a medical need ultimately for the patient, and a medical need that's still going to be there 6 to 10 years from now. That's the other part of drug development. It's a long-term gain, and you've got to look beyond what is there now and look and see what else is in the pipeline. What is your probability of success, and how do you balance all of that into sort of the value proposition? That sort of also heads us into sort of where we're thinking about on the next session. We've talked a lot about sort of what it takes for a good company. What are the things about exit strategies? How do you sort of plan for multiple different milestones and ensure robust development? Is there so spinning from that into concepts about how do you get a meeting? And actually, there was one very interesting question in the chat, which was driven by the comments around sort of focusing on clinical programs, and that is, where do companies go for funding in order to actually get to the point where they start to have clinical data? And I think this is largely a question driven by the fact that more and more we see investors are not wanting to get involved until there is some clinical proof of concept. And we get the question a lot about how do we actually, are we in a catch-22 situation where we can't get the funding to show we get clinical proof of concept without having clinical proof of concept? So I don't know, Jay, whether Alan, whether you've got sort of comments on advice on those fronts.
Happy to talk about it. So In all honesty, this is where the art of fundraising starts to kick in more and more. Fundraising is oftentimes turned more art than science at the end of the day, and the main reason behind it is what you had just highlighted. But with that being said, there are many parts of it that could be systemized to a certain extent. At the end of the day, folks want to see very good science and a path to develop that science in as de-risked of a way as possible. So tying back into the question from before, what actually survives that initial call or that initial email, etc., so that the more advanced stages of diligence are kicked in, is that there has to be some level of data to match what the investors' expectations are. While more and more investors are waiting for later and later stages, there are still plenty of investors that entertain the early stage science. And some investment firms, they prefer certain indications. They may have certain levels of expectations. Some people may want NHP data when it comes to a particular modality and a particular indication, whereas the bar may be only in vivo mice data for a different modality in a different indication. So just matching what you are pitching to what investor could help solve a good bit of the problem that you just highlighted. But some rules of thumb in terms of what crosses our desk and what survives the initial quick peak, there needs to be a reason given to the investor to take the second meeting. And oftentimes, that is some level of in vivo data. It doesn't have to be the full in vivo data package, full talks, full dose response, full everything, but there needs to be some tease of an in vivo data and some highlight of the high level strategy that would provide us the interest to want to learn more, to want to meet, to want to further discuss. So I tend to suggest to folks to include some level of in vivo data in the initial pitch deck that you would send out. And more importantly, perhaps just put the takeaway of the slide in the title itself. It sounds kind of silly, but we're thumbing through so many decks every single day that the best way for the entrepreneur to ensure that we are taking away what he wants us to take away from a particular slide or a particular experiment is to just make the main takeaway of that slide itself as the title. Those are just a few quick tips. Happy to further head off into it, but I think it's more of an addressable problem than the catch-22 sometimes it may appropriately feel like.
Jay, I think that was a great way to put it because that was probably some of the best advice I had received towards my last venture was literally have a shocking title so that they knew it, given exactly what you said, was that they were thumbing through so many of them. And scientists like to write. They like to put, they like to overdo what's in there. And some of the best advice I had gotten from one of the analysts was, you know what, reduce this, put this in the title. And I thought, well, that's not the title of what, just put that in the title. And it resulted in about a 10x increase in response because they were exactly that. It gave them what to look for rather than trying to read through what I thought was valuable. It gave them what to look for. And I think that was, nobody shared that with me. Not 10 years. Nobody shared that was a way to do that until that one analyst did it. So I think that's actually a great suggestion and piece of advice.
I appreciate it.
To echo, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So, I mean, I agree with what Jay has said, everything there. One comment I'd add, actually, I think, is because of the kind of the difficult macro picture that we have had from, so let's say 2022 to 2025, investors all shifted upstream to later stage companies because there was, I guess, less money around. As we're in the kind of a recovery period now, there's only so many late stage companies. So I think you will see a drift of investors towards the earlier stage stuff over the next 2 to 3 years. But I do agree with Jay, there are a bunch of investors who do fund that stuff. But I guess my point is I think we will see more. Sorry, Adam.
No. To take a tangent from what Jay and Jeff with a G said, that um, we've worked with uh, university spinouts before, and they're fantastic, but yet the question of let's spend 40 years answering this minutia of a question is just sometimes you just got to get them back on track. Who cares about whether this mice can see 3D whatever? It's just get them on track. Will that help you answer the FDA's IND requirements, to give you the green light to move it forward to phase one? I mean, and working with scientists and getting them back on track because their mind is trained to answer these questions and be inquisitive and all these things is fantastic. But working with a fresh spin out from a university lab to get them on track it has been a challenge at times. And you just got to be disciplined. Like, stop trying. And, I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth this way because I'm looped up and I'm drooling anyway. So let it roll. I'm leaning into it. All right. Which is out of one side, I'm like, let's not try to reinvent the wheel every time. And on the other side, I'm saying that stop being cute and trying to show that you're better than the system. Because at some point, the rubber has to meet the road, and you need to stop cutting corners for $12. It's just or like 3 months out of a 7-year development plan. It's just not worth it. I do believe in creative financing. I do believe because we are part of that. We invest in the development, not per se the company. And we do see ourselves as creative in being able to do stuff in Europe or India or somewhere like that follows the FDA like a puppy dog, mind you. But and not go somewhere like wherever that the data coming out of it is not accepted, or it's tricky, or there's a language barrier or anything like that. And I think it's just getting people to follow some level of norm and sprinkle in and pepper in some level of creativity and having that blend as I jumble and give you word salad. It just I think would be the best approach, basically.
Oh, no, I totally agree with you there. I mean, the worst thing that can happen to a company is to just have their entire data set called into question. That just
Yeah.
immediately stops the conversation front dead and center. So, whatever your key set of experiments are, you definitely should not cut the corners on those.
No, and we get that at Certara quite a bit. We're very often and routinely asked by investing groups, banks, VCs, angel investors, high net worth to say, okay, look, we got this slide deck. What is this really? Read through what their enthusiasm is, and what is this really? Do they have an appropriate milestone? If X happens, what happens to Y? But they're saying they can pivot. If Y happens, they can go to Z. Is that possible? What are they looking at? What is the next decision point that will give us an idea? Because they seem to have a very large runway. What does that look like? And a lot of that gets back to the innovator perspective, as they're trying to present everything in their head, and they want it written down because they think that's what it's going to go. And we do a lot of reality checking of, okay, great. Like Alan pointed out, some of your data, came from Vietnam on a very small study. We need to go back and look at that because there's going to have to be a bridging somewhere. And are we sure this is going to work? And, you get well, yes, it is. I know it will. I'm glad you know. However, the people with the checkbook, they're not as convinced. We need to give them a milestone, a pathway, what that success looks like, if A, then B, if C, then D. And I think there's a hesitancy for some to think, but you're not understanding my importance. Well, we do understand what's important to you. And Certara very often has that same discussions with them, Alan, of like, hey, we were all scientists. We're there with you. We understand what you're trying to do, but these guys don't see it that way. We've got to distill this down to what is achievable, tangible, and where can it go? And that sometimes is a little bit of an uphill battle because a lot of them have to acquiesce into it. They have to become comfortable that, okay, well, you're not worried about my other question. Well, not really. Not now. It's a great question, but we're not worried about your, mice being able to see 3D because that is irrelevant to what we're trying to do right now. But great thought. We'll come back to that, but let's look at how we got there. And in that enthusiasm and desire to do the science, I think we find a lot of times they forget to understand milestone. What is the tangibility? What are you giving them that can give them that assurance or the belief that that money is going to be well spent because that's going to lead to X? And I sometimes think that is a challenge, especially on the spinouts.
And I think just from the founder perspective, I would say that I feel that execution is really important. So even if you're not in the clinic yet, it comes back to what Jay said. Get the in vivo data, show that works. Then you move to NHP, do your tox studies, show that works. And now so Tegmine has just gotten to that NHP stage, but then we're also starting to de-risk the CMC. So showing that we have a cell line that can make the antibody so that people have that faith that when you get into the manufacturing that you've already got an antibody that can produce greater than 3 grams per liter or 4 grams per liter, or show that your ADC does not aggregate upon freeze thaw and things like that. People want to know that this thing has legs and can go the mile into the clinic. And if you can show that you've de-risked that along the way, even if you haven't done it yet, you're showing your execution at each step. And I think that builds trust with investors.
I think.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Please, Fran.
No, I'm just conscious that we're running up against time, and I think there's been a huge amount of good advice. I do want to have time to tackle a couple of the questions that have come in. So one, which is very topical, is really around how do you as companies embrace AI in the evaluation of opportunities, or actually for Jeff in sort of the execution of his day-to-day business?
So we've adopted AI, I would say, starting about a year ago. So of course we just use the LLMs, large language models, just to help us with documentation and just day to day asking questions, refining things. One of the most amazing projects that we've taken on has actually been to look at our lead antibody and to have that evaluated by another company via AI and machine learning. They developed about 3.6 million variants of that antibody. They have used that to make sure that it not only folds in its native antibody state, but also can now be formatted as scFv. They have looked at it from every single angle, better binding, developability, all the different how well does it express in CHO cells. So if you look at all these different things, you actually use AI and ML to say what is the best antibody it can be. And the results are quite stunning. And so I think this is a sneak peek into the future that 10 years from now, I would guess that antibodies entering the clinic all will have had AI or ML look at those antibodies to make sure they're the best. And if you haven't done that, I think there's just going to be a structural disadvantage relative to companies that have.
I think it's clear that the new thing, the new shiny object is AI. That seems to be a very investor heavy focus. But I'm a kid from the 80s where the Terminator came out with Schwarzenegger, and we know how that all.
We know how it's going to end.
Yes, exactly. It's a slippery slope, and at some point we got to stop. I'm not disagreeing with you, Jeff, but at some point we need to sprinkle back in the science and stop tying it with AI, basically. I think it all comes down to science, regardless of what Chat GBT tells you, you know?
Sure. And so just to clarify, what we did is lab in the loop, where you're using real data to inform AI, and that's very different from AI coming up with hypotheses and then you go to test it and nothing works, right? So
Mhm.
I think that the point is, if you use this to your advantage, it supercharges science. And I would say I think one of the themes of this is the science matters. And so who you choose to work with actually is very important. But the results we've seen are tangible, and they're very much real, and they fit right back into what eventually just becomes normal clinical paths, right? You can't avoid the fact that you need a drug to work.
Yeah, and I think that, Jeff, that's really important because we have seen the agencies now start to question data coming in, that they're thinking, was this data induced perspective, or is this theory? Who did this? And the agencies have started to come back and say, we won't accept AI. We will not, that to us isn't science. Where is the science that was introduced to it in order to create a lot of your assessments and conclusions? And and EMA actually is going to be having a decision coming out next year that they're not allowed to necessarily use AI in review, and they don't want companies using AI for determinative decision making. But as you pointed out, the systems that allow data introduction in order to create those different scenarios is where they're wanting to drive. They want to keep the intelligence in the development, but use tools to expedite that development, reduce time on target by using good data to generate things that would have taken, the scientists a year to do. And it's becoming a really big topic. Japan's having a large issue with it, and they are going to have an open forum on it next year as well. But I like how you put it, that you were not just using an LLM model to create a hypothesis and go, well, did it work? Tying in real data to make the decisions is what they will accept, but they don't like that pure AI perspective.
And
Well,
Fran, I'm sorry to cut you off and ruin your flow on this, but the one thing before we leave the general subject of for biotech CEOs, please, when you're in preclinical, don't ask for $30 million. Okay? Just show me an animal data that justifies you getting to IND and phase one. And we'd love to fund that phase one as opposed to your phase 3 100-patient non-small cell lung cancer program in which the endpoint is death, for God's
yeah.
sakes. Just
You aren't going to get that for 30 million.
Yeah,
I
I was gonna say that's a pretty good deal for 30 million.
Yeah, we put in 43 on that one. So we had to, because the biotech, when I met them, I met them at the NC Biotech Forum or whatever it was. They were asking for 17 mil, and all they had was 19 patients, investigator initiated. And I said, why are you asking for so that much? Because we need to do a phase 3. I'm like, okay, come on, dudes. It's just, and we co-funded them. We invested in the program. They were able to only raise 1.4 mil, and we put in the other 43 for that phase 3 100-patient non-small cell lung cancer program. And it hit endpoint, it did well, so on and so forth. But that's what I'm saying. Please don't ask. Just stage yourself, will you? Don't go beyond the tip of your nose on this. It's just.
I do think that is actually a perfect point to wrap up. So I think the take home message on this is justify what you ask for and don't ask for the world. But I would like to thank all of the panelists today. I think it's been a fascinating discussion. I think we could have gone on probably for another hour and still not exhausted the advice we could give. But thank you all, and we will go through and take a look at everything that came in the chat after the meeting and sort of deal with that online as appropriate. I'm going to hand over to Marcella to actually just talk a little bit again about the upcoming biotech forum for those who are still on the line. But thank you all again to our presenters.
Thanks,
Thank you,
guys.
everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, everyone.
panelists. Just a quick reminder before you go, we only had an hour today, so if you do want to spend a full day on these topics, join us at the Certara Biotech Forum on Monday, September 21st. It's a full day workshop on the same themes we covered here. And we will be able to prepare you for Resi 2026 and JPM 2027. Again, this event is in partnership with Life Science Nation, and you will have time to sit down one-to-one with our experts. The QR code is on the screen. Places are limited and registration is by request, so do put your name in today. Thanks, everyone, and we hope you have a nice day.
Thank you, Marcella, and thanks everyone for joining the call. Again, we are grateful to Certara for being our sponsor for this webinar. Just a reminder that we appreciate you joining this webinar. We encourage you to attend Resi Boston, September 22nd and 23rd, where we expect over 400 investors available for partnering. It'll be a great session, and as you just heard, Certara will be working with us to do a great pre-Resi day event. So on the 21st, called the Biotech Forum, especially applicable to biotechs who have raised seed or Series A, helping them figure out the strategy to get that licensing deal and eventually get to market. We also encourage you to register for Resi JPM, which is our flagship event where it will be huge, probably over 800 investors right in the heart of San Francisco during JPM at the Marriott Marquis. These are both two-day events followed by several-day virtual partnering. So take advantage of this and accelerate your fundraising runway. We thank our tech sponsors, our tech hub co-marketing partners. They have been great in helping us help you raise funds and out-license. So we really would like to thank them for helping us with this webinar and helping us with getting the word out for Resi events and distributing codes. Speaking of codes, use Web200 for $200 off of Resi Boston or Resi JPM. And these are some of the great investors you can meet there. So, 3 days of fun in Boston coming up with the 21st Biotech Forum being a free event for biotechs who have raised seed or Series A. We hope to see you there. We hope to see you at Resi, and thanks again for joining. We'll see you next time, and keep an eye out for our next webinar. Thanks, everyone.